You haven't thought about these in 40 years, but the second you see them, you'll remember everything. And if you grew up in the US, UK, or Canada, Grandma definitely made at least one of these. How many do you remember? Let's start in North America. Because if you grew up in the States or Canada in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, summer meant one thing, and that is Grandma's picnic table that had a strawberry shortcake. Not the cartoon, not the store-bought sponge in a plastic tray. I'm talking about Grandma's strawberry shortcake. Real biscuits, slightly crumbly, still warm, strawberries that had been sitting in sugar long enough to make their own syrup, and whipped cream she made herself, in a bowl, with a hand mixer that rattled the whole counter. You remember that smell when the strawberries hit the sugar? That right there is summer, peach cobbler, or crisp. This one's different depending on whose grandma you're talking about. Some families did a proper pastry top. Some did the crisp, butter, oats, brown sugar, straight from the oven. Either way, you were eating it warm, probably with vanilla ice cream melting all over it. And if Grandma had a peach tree in the backyard, you already know. That cobbler was on the table every single weekend. Lemon meringue pie. This pie sat on Grandma's counter under a glass dome like it was precious. And it was. That filling, tart, silky, bright yellow, and then that meringue piled high, toasted just enough on top. Here's the thing, though. Grandma's lemon meringue was never perfect looking. It was a little lopsided. The meringue wept a little, and it was still the best thing you ever tasted. Every single time. Icebox cakes and creamsicle-style icebox pie. Before anybody had air conditioning, Grandma had the icebox, and what she did with it was nothing short of genius. Icebox cake. Layers of whipped cream and chocolate wafer cookies that softened overnight into something almost like a dream. Creamsicle pie, orange and vanilla, cold and creamy, no baking required, just patience. Grandma always said, it needs to set overnight, and waiting for that pie was actual torture. Homemade popsicles, fudgesicles, and nuts and bolts were the snacks that didn't stop at dessert. Summer afternoons meant homemade popsicles. Grandma poured juice or Kool-Aid into ice cube trays with toothpicks. That was it. That was the recipe. And they were incredible. Then there was nuts and bolts. That old-school savory snack mix. Cereal, pretzels, nuts, all toasted up with butter and Worcestershire sauce in the oven. Grandma made a huge batch in a roasting pan, and it lasted about 48 hours before it was gone. You could smell it baking from outside, through the window in July. Now, if you grew up in England, Scotland, or Wales, Grandma's kitchen had a different rhythm. It wasn't a picnic table. It was a proper tea, a good biscuit tin, and something homemade waiting on a doily. But that feeling of walking into Grandma's kitchen and knowing something delicious was ready, that never changed. No matter what country you grew up in. Jam tarts. These were simple as it gets. Short crust pastry, a spoonful of jam, baked until the edges go just slightly golden. Strawberry, raspberry, black currant. Grandma always made a full tray, and you'd try to sneak one before they cooled down and burn your tongue every single time. Every British grandma had her own pastry. Some were buttery and crumbly, some were thicker, but they were always made by hand, in her kitchen, and they always tasted better than anything you'd ever buy in a shop. And if you had rock cakes, you'll remember they didn't look like much. Rough edges, a bit lumpy, studded with currants. They're not trying to impress anyone, but bite into a fresh one, still slightly warm, with a cup of tea, and you understand immediately why Grandma made these on repeat. They're called rock cakes because of how they look, not how they taste. And if yours were actually rock hard, Grandma left them in a bit too long. You ate them anyway. Chelsea buns and iced buns. These were soft, sticky, rolled up with currants and spice, glazed on top. Grandma would make a whole tray, and they'd pull apart in the most satisfying way. Sweet, doughy, warm, and iced buns. That soft white finger bun with a thick stripe of white icing on top. You'd find these at every birthday party, every school fete, every summer gathering. They looked almost too simple, but there was something about that soft bread and that sweet icing that nobody has ever really improved on. Victoria sponge. Now, this is the one. 2 golden sponge layers, jam in the middle, cream or buttercream dusted with icing sugar on top. That's it. No fuss, no decoration, no piping bag. And somehow, it was always perfect. Grandma didn't need a stand mixer. She didn't need a thermometer. She just knew. The Victoria sponge is the most British thing in existence. And if your grandma made one, you already know exactly what I'm talking about. Fairy cakes and chocolate cornflake cakes. They're not cupcakes. Don't call them cupcakes. Do you remember them? Small, light. A little dome of sponge with simple water icing on top. Maybe a single Smartie in the middle. Grandma let you ice your own. And yours always looked terrible and tasted amazing. And chocolate cornflake cakes. No baking. Just melted chocolate, golden syrup, butter, and cornflakes pressed into paper cases and left to set. Grandma made these with you, not for you. And there was always more chocolate mixture eaten straight from the bowl than ever made it into the cases. And we can't leave Britain without talking about jelly and ice cream. Not Jell O salad, not a mold, but a bowl of bright red or orange jelly, wobbly, cold, with a scoop of vanilla ice cream melting into it. This was at every birthday party, every Sunday tea, every time you went to Grandma's, and she wanted to make you feel special without making a fuss. It was the simplest thing in the world, and it was everything. Now, this section is for our Canadian viewers, but honestly, everyone should stick around, because these 3 are some of the most comforting, most forgotten, most underrated sweets in the entire video. And if you grew up in Canada and Grandma made even one of these, you already know how special they are.
When I think of the ultimate Canadian dessert that takes me back to my childhood, it has to be the Quebec classic pudding.
Pudding chômeur, which translates, and I love this, to poor man's pudding. It came out of Quebec during the Great Depression, when grandmothers were feeding families on almost nothing. Simple cake batter poured over hot maple syrup or brown sugar sauce, baked until the sauce bubbles up around the edges and soaks into the bottom. It sounds humble, and it is, but that's exactly what makes it unforgettable. This is the kind of dessert that tastes like somebody made it specifically to make you feel better, because originally, that's exactly what it was for.
Wild blueberry grunt. Your grandmother would love this one.
Yes, that's really what it's called. And the name comes from the sound the blueberries make as they bubble away on the stovetop underneath the dumplings. Fresh, wild blueberries. The small ones, the ones that actually taste like something, simmered in a pot, with soft, doughy dumplings dropped right on top and left to steam. No oven, no fuss, just a pot on Grandma's stove. And the whole kitchen smelling like blueberries and summer. It's not pretty. It never looked like much in the bowl, but one spoonful, and you understood. Flapper pie, a prairie classic. Graham cracker crust, custard filling, and meringue piled on top. It's been compared to lemon meringue pie, but creamier, simpler, and somehow even more comforting. This one nearly disappeared completely. Younger generations mostly have no idea it ever existed. But grandmothers across Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta were making this every summer for decades. It's one of those recipes that got passed down on a handwritten index card. And then, one day, the card got lost. If your grandma made flapper pie, you are genuinely lucky, and you should find that recipe. There's something about summer and Grandma's kitchen that just stays with you. It wasn't fancy, there was no recipe card. Half the time she was just eyeballing it. But whatever came out of that kitchen, off that picnic table, out of that icebox, tasted like the best thing you'd ever eaten in your life. We're talking about the snacks and sweets that defined summer for millions of us, the ones nobody really makes anymore, the ones your grandkids have probably never even heard of. We're covering America, Canada, and the UK. And here's the thing, we didn't get to everything. There was no Nanaimo bars on this list, no Angel Delight, no coconut ice, no Watergate salad, and no wacky cake. That Depression-era recipe with no eggs, no butter, and somehow still the most delicious thing you ever ate. Every single one of us has a grandma snack that nobody else knows. Something so tied to one kitchen, one summer, one person, that the recipe probably doesn't exist anywhere on the internet. It lived in her hands, and nowhere else. If this took you back, even a little, you already know what to do. Until next time, go call your grandma. Or if she's no longer with us, just take a moment today to remember her kitchen. Because some things are worth holding on to,